To archaeology now, where Mesha Stele, also called the Moabite stone, has finally been verified by researchers, at least to a considerable degree of certainty, that it does indeed contain an explicit reference to King David. To discuss, we're joined by Israeli tour guide Anat Harel. Anat, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Can you tell us first about the Moabite stone and what it refers to in regards to King David?
Well, so in archaeology, we only have two references, two evidences of the existence of King David. The first one is this Moabite stone that was found in the 19th century, and it was discovered by an archaeologist. And as soon as he discovered it, he made an impression of it with some paper. After that, the locals broke it into pieces, thinking that they would get a lot more money by selling it on the black market in pieces as opposed to in one piece. And eventually these pieces all came together, and it's now sitting in France in the Louvre. Now, what's amazing about this rock that was found in Moab, which is on the other side of the Jordan River, is that it has a mention. It was written by the king of Moab, one of the kings of Moab, and it mentions the fact that he went to war against Israel, against one of the descendants of the house of David. And that is also written on a different stone that was found in Tel Aviv in the 1990s, another mention from the kingdom of Aram Damascus, that the king of Aram Damascus went to war against one of the descendants of the house of David. And so these two mentions of the house of David are the only instances that we have that we can take archaeology and the story of the Jewish people and the story of King David and match them. These two have to do with the 9th century BCE, not the 10th century when David lived, but with his dynasty. I think it's several of his grandsons afterwards, about 100 years after he supposedly lived.
So, Anat, can you just clarify what is new here? Like you said, the stone's been sitting in the Louvre in Paris since it was discovered in 1868. So what's happened now?
So at first they deciphered it, and they realized that it probably said so-and-so fought against so-and-so of the house of David. But it wasn't very, very certain. There were scholars who said no, scholars who said yes. What happened in the last 5 years, 5 or 6 years, is that there's some kind of a new technology that they used. And with this new technology, they re-verified the actual inscription and are more certain than ever that it actually says the house of David. And that's the new part, is that they have now verified the original inscription.
And how do we know that those texts have been correctly deciphered?
That is up to the scientists to decide. I don't know exactly what new method they use, but every number of years we have new technology that uses new methods of verifying something or disputing something that was done a few years ago. I don't exactly know how they did it, but they did.
But looking at the stone, the letters look quite similar to Hebrew, don't they?
Yes, the language of the Moabites and the language of the Hebrews was quite similar, probably the same kind of dialect. They did understand each other, yes.
And why is King David so important in the history of this land?
Oh, because for the Jewish people, King David was the most important king of all right? If you think of a king that is the most important one, it was King David. King David is also adored by the Muslims. And King David is also very, very important for Christians, because King David, the house of King David, is the one that eventually will, according to the book of Isaiah, bring on the Messiah for the Jewish people. And for the Christians, Jesus, who is their Messiah, came from the house of David. So David is the link to connect all of the three monotheistic religions of this land. And he's the connection that makes us all who we are.
That's a big connection. Does this updated verification of the inscription affect the city of David itself?
You know, the city of David is a little bit different because we know that there was probably some kind of a David, because we have two archaeological verifications, the Moabite stone and the stone from Tel Dan. The story of the city of David is a bit different because when Israeli archaeologists started to excavate there in the very early 70s, what we found was that we found a large monumental building. So Eilat Mazar, who was the archaeologist who was excavating, discovered this humongous palace, you can say. And she dated this palace to the 10th century, the first half of the 10th century BCE, which means that if you're counting back in generations, that would put King David as having lived in that humongous monolithic stone house. Now, here comes the most controversial part of biblical archaeology, because half of the biblical archaeologists agree with her, and the other half say, oh, poppycock, that's not true. That building is dated to the second half of the 10th century,
That's
putting
incredible.
it about 50 years later, which means that it's really not the King David. And what makes it so interesting is that in the excavations of King David, the people who live on top of the excavations of King David are Palestinians. It's the Palestinian village of Silwan.
That's right. Thank you
So
so
if you
much.
could
And Hara, I'm
prove
so sorry to cut you off there. It's fascinating.
Okay,
Thank you again
That's
on the
fine.
verification of King David. Thank you.
Sure.